Stop. If you are over 60 and you reach for the same handful of necklines because they feel safe, there is a very good chance the exact neckline you trust the most is quietly making your entire midsection look bigger every single time you put it on. Not because of your body, because of the neckline. And by the end of this video, you are going to know exactly which mistakes to look for and exactly what to wear instead, starting with tops and dresses you probably already own. Think about the last time you stood in front of a mirror trying to decide between two nearly identical tops. Same color, same fabric, same general fit. And yet one made you feel put together while the other made you feel heavier and older for reasons you could never quite explain. You probably blamed the fit through your midsection or the way the fabric sat on your hips, without ever once glancing back up to the neckline itself. That overlooked detail, sitting closest to your face and furthest from your belly, is often exactly where the real difference was hiding the entire time. Most women never think of the neckline as having anything to do with the belly at all. It sits at the top of your body, nowhere near your midsection, so it seems logical to assume it only affects your face or your collarbone. But the eye does not view your body in isolated pieces the way a closet organizes clothing into categories. It reads you as one continuous shape from your chin to your hem, and the very first thing it encounters on that journey, the neckline quietly decides how everything below it gets interpreted, including the exact area you have been trying to soften with every other trick in this whole series. I want you to know something right now, before we go any further. It was never your body creating that heavier, boxier look you sometimes catch in photographs. It was almost always a neckline shape working against the rest of your outfit rather than with it, sitting right above your face where you would never think to look for the actual cause. I am going to walk you through 5 neckline mistakes today, counting down from 5 to 1, the exact mistakes I see apple-shaped women over 60 make again and again, often with necklines they consider classic safe or simply easiest to wear. Your body has never been the problem here. These are simple, learnable visual principles, the same eye tricks a stylist relies on every single day. And once you understand them, you will look at every single neckline in your closet completely differently. I promise you this. The last mistake on this list, the number 1 detail, is the one almost nobody has ever had explained to them properly, and it is the single biggest change you can make to how any outfit reads on your body from head to toe. It costs nothing extra to apply, and it works with clothes you already own just as well as it works on anything new. Once you understand it, you will find yourself checking for it automatically, almost without thinking, every single time you get dressed from here forward. So stay with me all the way to the end, because I really do not want you to miss it. Let's start at the beginning. Number 5. Wearing a high, tight crew neck, turtleneck, or funnel neck that covers your entire throat and sits snugly against your collarbone. A high neckline can feel like the modest, put-together, professional choice, especially compared to anything that shows a bit of skin. But covering the neck entirely does something very specific to your overall proportions. It visually shortens the distance between your chin and the rest of your torso, compressing your upper body into a shorter, denser-looking block.
Yeah.
Once that upper block reads as shorter and denser, everything below it, including your midsection, appears to be carrying proportionally more visual weight, simply because there is less open space above it to balance things out. The fix is opening up that space with a lower, more relaxed neckline, even a modest one. A soft scoop, a gentle V, or simply leaving the top button or two of a collared shirt undone creates a small triangle or curve of visible skin right below your chin. That small opening does an enormous amount of visual work, elongating the distance from your jaw to your chest and giving the eye a place to travel downward smoothly instead of hitting a solid wall of fabric right at your throat. You do not need anything dramatic here. Even an inch or two of additional openness at the neckline changes how the entire silhouette below it gets read. If cooler weather genuinely calls for extra coverage at the throat, there are gentler alternatives to a fully closed turtleneck worth knowing about. A mock neck with a slightly lower, looser collar still provides warmth without sealing your neck completely, and a cowl or funnel style that sits a little looser than a true turtleneck softens the same boxy effect considerably. Even keeping a turtleneck you already own, but layering an open cardigan or a long pendant necklace over it, can reintroduce a small vertical or diagonal element that helps counteract the compression a fully closed neckline creates on its own. It also helps to remember that a high neckline is not automatically flattering simply because it feels modest or coordinated with a formal setting. Many women reach for a turtleneck specifically for a dressier occasion, assuming full coverage reads as more elegant, when in fact a lower, more open neckline in a beautiful fabric can look just as polished while doing far more visual work for your proportions. Elegance and coverage are not the same requirement, and once you separate the two in your own mind, choosing necklines for special occasions becomes considerably easier. But the very next mistake flips something almost every woman believes about which necklines flatter a fuller figure, so stay with me for this one. Number 4. Assuming a wide, straight boat neckline, sometimes called a bateau neckline, is automatically flattering because it shows off the collarbone and shoulders. This advice gets repeated constantly, and on certain frames, a boat neckline genuinely does look elegant and open. The problem is the shape of the line itself. A boat neckline runs in one continuous straight, horizontal line from shoulder to shoulder, and a straight horizontal line at the very top of your silhouette functions almost like a header, setting the tone for how wide the eye expects the rest of your body to be. Instead of narrowing anything, a wide horizontal neckline actually widens your entire upper frame first, and once the top of the frame reads as wide, your midsection underneath it gets measured against that same wide starting point, rather than against your actual proportions. The fix is choosing a neckline with some curve or downward movement instead of a flat horizontal line, something like a gentle scoop, a soft V, or a sweetheart shape that dips rather than stays perfectly level from shoulder to shoulder. Any of these options still shows off your collarbone and upper chest just as effectively as a boat neckline does, but the curve or downward point creates movement for the eye instead of a flat, static line. If you already own boat neck tops you love, they are not necessarily a lost cause. Right. Pairing one with a long pendant necklace that hangs down past the neckline can interrupt that flat horizontal line with a vertical element, softening the effect considerably without requiring you to give up the style entirely. It is worth noting that not every horizontal element at the top of an outfit causes this same problem. A boat neckline is specifically flat and straight from one shoulder point to the other, with no curve or dip anywhere along its length, which is exactly what makes it read as a header line for the whole silhouette. A neckline that technically runs somewhat wide but still curves gently downward toward the center, like a wide scoop, does not create the same flat, unbroken horizontal statement because the curve itself introduces a small amount of vertical movement even within a wider shape. The flatness of the line matters just as much as its width when it comes to how the eye interprets everything below it. This particular mistake shows up especially often in photographs, more than it tends to in person, since a camera flattens depth and emphasizes clean lines even more than the human eye does standing across a room. If you have ever looked back at photos from an event and felt like a certain top made you look wider than you remembered feeling in the moment, a boat neckline is frequently the quiet culprit behind that specific kind of disappointment, precisely because the flat line reads even more prominently once it is captured as a still image rather than experienced in motion. Number 3. Choosing a deep, heavily draped cowl neckline where the fabric bunches and folds dramatically across your upper chest. Cowl necklines are often marketed as soft, forgiving, and universally flattering, since the fabric drapes rather than clings to any specific body part. But a deep cowl requires a significant amount of extra fabric folded and gathered right at the very top of your torso, and all of that gathered fabric creates real visible volume stacked directly above your midsection. Instead of skimming past your chest and creating a clean line downward, a heavily draped cowl adds a soft but noticeable block of bulk right where your neckline meets the rest of your outfit, and that bulk visually connects to whatever fullness exists below it, making the two areas read as one larger continuous mass rather than two separate well-proportioned sections. The fix is choosing a shallower cowl with less draped fabric, or opting for a soft V or wrap-style neckline instead, which gives you a similar gentle, non-clingy quality without the concentrated bunching at the chest. If you already own and love a deep cowl top, a thin scarf or a delicate layered necklace tucked partially into the drape can help break up that solid block of fabric, giving the eye a smaller focal point to rest on instead of one large undefined area of gathered material. Fabric weight plays a significant role in how a cowl behaves as well, which is worth checking before you buy. A cowl cut from a heavier, stiffer fabric holds its folds in a more sculptural, structured way, which can actually look intentional and polished rather than bunched and heavy. A cowl cut from very thin, slippery fabric tends to collapse into loose, shapeless folds that shift and settle differently every time you move, which is usually where the unflattering bulk becomes most noticeable. If a cowl top feels almost weightless when you pick it up off the hanger, that lightness is often exactly what causes the draping to look messy rather than deliberate once it is actually on your body. The season and occasion matter here too. A deep cowl in a heavy knit can genuinely work beautifully for a cozy winter outfit. Since the bulk reads as intentional warmth rather than accidental volume, especially paired with slim trousers or a fitted bottom that provides contrast elsewhere in the silhouette. That same deep cowl in a lightweight summer jersey, worn with an equally loose bottom half, tends to read as shapeless from top to bottom, with nothing anywhere in the outfit providing the structure needed to balance out all that soft draping. We are now more than halfway through this list, and if you are already picturing a specific top or dress hanging in your closet, that is exactly the point of this video. Necklines are one of the most overlooked categories in styling advice for fuller figures, mostly because nobody connects them to anything happening lower on the body, treating the neckline and the midsection as two completely unrelated stories rather than one continuous line the eye reads together. And remember, the number one detail on this entire list, the biggest change you can make, is still coming, so do not go anywhere yet. Number 2. Wearing a halter neckline, where the fabric ties or fastens directly behind your neck and leaves your shoulders and upper chest largely bare. A halter can feel bold and confident, and there is nothing wrong with baring your shoulders at any age if that is genuinely what you want to do. The issue is structural rather than aesthetic. Because a halter has no fabric across the shoulder itself, nothing at the top of the garment provides any horizontal frame or structure for the rest of the outfit to hang from. Without that framing, your torso below the halter reads as one long, uninterrupted expanse from your collarbone all the way down to your hem, with nothing breaking up the space or providing visual structure anywhere along the way, which tends to make the entire midsection look larger simply because it has become the largest single visual block on your body with no competition from anything above it. The fix is not necessarily avoiding halter necklines altogether, especially if you love how they feel. It is adding a small amount of structure back in around the shoulder area, either through a light cardigan or open jacket worn over the halter, or by choosing a halter style with a slightly wider band of fabric across the chest rather than a thin, minimal strap. That added width and structure gives the eye a frame to register before moving down to the rest of your silhouette. Restoring the sense of proportion, a halter naturally removes when worn completely on its own. A halter dress paired with a defined waist seam or belt can also help considerably, since the eye then has two clear reference points, the shoulder area and the waist, rather than one long, uninterrupted stretch of fabric with nothing marking any structure in between. The goal is never to hide the halter neckline itself, which can be a genuinely beautiful and youthful choice at any age, but simply to make sure something else in the outfit is doing the structural work the shoulder area would normally provide on a different neckline style. Jewelry can help fill this same role in a pinch more than most women realize. A substantial necklace or a pair of statement earrings worn with a halter neckline gives the eye something structured to register right at the top of your silhouette, even without any actual fabric providing that frame. It is a small, immediate fix that costs nothing if you already own the right pieces, and it works especially well for a single evening or event where altering or layering the outfit itself is not practical. Now, before we get to the number one detail on this entire list, I want to explain exactly why everything else we have covered matters so much less without it. The lower neckline, the curved shape, the shallower cowl, the added structure around a halter, every one of those fixes genuinely helps, but every single one of them is still working around one central principle that decides more than all of the others combined. Once you understand this final piece, you will start evaluating every single neckline you own by asking one simple question you have probably never thought to ask before. Number 1. Ignoring whether your neckline creates one continuous, unbroken line down your torso, or whether it gets abruptly canceled out by a seam, trim, or design detail sitting right where the neckline ends. This is the exact principle almost nobody ever explains, and it might be the single most important concept in this entire 5-part series. More important than the shape of the neckline itself, more important than how much skin it shows, more important than almost anything else we have discussed today. A V-neck, or a soft wrap-style opening, creates a genuinely elongating diagonal line, exactly the kind of line we have talked about throughout every video in this series. But that elongating effect only works if the line actually continues. If a beautiful V-neck ends abruptly at a horizontal seam, a contrasting trim, or a structured bodice line sitting directly across your chest, that horizontal detail cancels out every bit of the vertical elongation the V-neck just created, almost like starting a sentence with a wonderful idea and cutting it off before the point ever lands. What you want instead is a neckline that flows directly into the construction below it, continuing the same vertical or diagonal energy rather than being interrupted by it. A V-neck that leads naturally into a soft wrap bodice or an empire seam sitting under the bust keeps that single elongating line moving all the way from your collarbone to a point well above your natural waist, exactly the kind of uninterrupted vertical sweep we have discussed in earlier videos about tops and dresses. A surplice or crossover neckline that continues its diagonal fold down into a wrap-style waist seam does the exact same thing, letting one continuous visual idea carry all the way through your torso instead of getting cut off partway down. Here is a simple way to check for this the next time you are shopping, and it takes only a few seconds once you know what you are looking for. Trace the line of the neckline downward with your eyes or your finger and notice exactly where it stops. If it flows directly into another seam, fold, or design line continuing in a similar direction, you have found a garment working with this principle correctly. If it stops abruptly at a flat, horizontal seam or a contrasting band of trim that runs straight across your chest with no relationship to the neckline above it, that horizontal detail is quietly undoing everything the neckline was trying to accomplish, no matter how flattering that neckline looked on its own in a mirror. This principle explains something that puzzles a lot of women who have tried V-necks before without much success. A V-neck alone is not automatically flattering simply because it is a V-neck. Its effectiveness depends entirely on what happens the moment that V-shape ends. A deep, elegant V-neck sitting directly above a wide, contrasting waistband or a horizontal color block cancels its own effect almost completely, while a much shallower V-neck that flows smoothly into a soft, continuous drape can end up looking considerably more elongating, simply because nothing interrupts the line it started. This is exactly why two V-neck tops that look nearly identical on a hanger can produce such different results once you actually put them on. And it is also exactly why so much generic styling advice about V-necks falls flat in practice, since that advice almost never mentions what happens below the point of the V itself. I had a client, a warm and stylish woman named Nancy, who told me she owned at least a dozen V-neck tops and dresses, since she had heard for years that V-necks were supposed to be universally flattering, yet she still felt like something was consistently off every time she wore most of them. She had even started to wonder, quietly and without ever saying it out loud to anyone, whether the advice about V-necks simply did not apply to a body like hers. When we went through her closet together, the pattern became obvious almost immediately. Nearly every one of her V-neck pieces stopped at a horizontal seam or a contrasting waistband sitting directly across her midsection, canceling out the very elongation the V-neck had started. We did not change her body, and we barely changed her wardrobe at all. We simply sorted her existing V-neck pieces into two piles, the ones that continued into a seam or fold moving in the same direction, and the ones that got abruptly cut off by a straight horizontal line. She began reaching only for the first pile, and within a single week, she told me a close friend had commented, without any prompting at all, that she looked taller lately. Nothing about her height or her body had changed. What had changed was which V-necks she was choosing to wear. She later told me she felt almost embarrassed that the answer had been sitting in her closet the entire time, in pieces she already owned and had simply never learned how to sort. That is the real power of understanding all 5 of these details together, rather than fixing just one and calling it done. Your body was never the problem, and it never needed to be minimized, hidden, or managed with the right trick. Most necklines are simply designed in isolation, without any consideration for what happens to that same line once it reaches your chest, your waist, or your hips, and now you know exactly what to look for, tracing that line with your own eyes before you ever commit to buying or wearing something again. None of this requires an entirely new wardrobe, a dramatic budget, or waiting for some future version of your body before you allow yourself to feel put together. It requires opening up a high neckline slightly, choosing curves over flat horizontal lines, softening a heavily draped cowl, adding a little structure back around a bare halter, and above all, tracing every neckline downward to see whether its line actually continues or gets abruptly cut off. Small, informed choices, made once while you are still standing in front of a mirror, rather than fought with every single time you get dressed. The next time you catch yourself reaching past a familiar top for the third time in a row, unsure why it never quite works the way you hoped, pause for just a moment and look up rather than down. Trace the neckline first, before you even glance at the waist or the hem. More often than not, the real story of how an outfit is going to read on you starts at your collarbone, in a detail so small and so easy to overlook that almost nobody ever thinks to check it, until now. If any part of this felt like it was speaking directly to a top or dress hanging in your own closet right now, I would love to know which mistake surprised you the most. Was it the high crew neck, the wide boat neckline, or that final detail about the continuous line? Tell me in the comments below, because your story might be exactly what helps another woman finally understand that it was never her body working against her, just one detail sitting quietly above her collarbone she never had the chance to learn about until now.